Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to trace an incredible 80-year journey of constant reinvention, a story that takes us from the rubble of a world war all the way to the complex crossroads of the 21st century.
Okay, so let's just set the stage here. Picture this. On one side, you've got Britain in 1945. I mean, they're victorious in the war, sure, but the country is basically bankrupt, and it's still at the heart of this huge global empire. Now fast forward to today, and it's a completely different picture, right? It's this complex, super diverse, post-Brexit nation. The story of how we got from point A to point B, well, that's what we're diving into.
All right, so our story kicks off right at the end of the war, in 1945. Now, you have to imagine, the country was just exhausted. But, and this is the key thing, people were united. They had this powerful, overwhelming demand for something totally new. This wasn't just about patching things up. It was about tearing up the old blueprint and completely reimagining what a country could be for its people.
And that one idea, that demand for change, it was powerful enough to fuel a political earthquake. I mean, the Labour Party, led by Clement Attlee, just swept into power with this massive mandate. And it wasn't just a mandate to, run the country. It was a mandate to transform it. This really set the stage for one of the boldest social experiments in modern history.
So, what was the big solution? What was this grand plan? Well, it was the creation of the welfare state. The core idea, which came from something called the Beveridge Report, was just revolutionary for its time. It was about building this giant safety net that would protect every single citizen, as they said, from cradle to grave. It was designed to go head-to-head with what they called the five giants: poverty, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And this vision wasn't just talk. It was built on three massive pillars. First, you've got the National Health Service, the NHS, which kicked off in 1948. Suddenly, healthcare was based on your need, not how much money you had. A total game changer. Then, a whole new social security system to provide that safety net. And finally, the state took control of huge industries. We're talking coal, railways, electricity. The idea being they should serve the public, not just private profit. I mean, this fundamentally rewired daily life for millions.
Okay, but here's the twist. While all this incredible nation-building was happening at home, Britain's role on the world stage was actually shrinking. The huge British Empire was starting to unravel. It really kicked off with the independence of India and Pakistan in 1947. This was a huge signal that the age of empire was ending, and Britain had to figure out its new and, frankly, much less certain place in the world.
All right, let's move forward a bit. Because out of all that post-war austerity, this incredible new energy just starts to bubble up. By the time we hit the 1960s, we're in a whole new era of optimism and cultural swagger, really. It was fueled by a booming economy and a new generation that was just desperate to break free from the past.
And just like that, bam! London and Britain as a whole becomes the absolute center of the cultural universe. You've heard of the swinging 60s, right? This was it. We're talking Carnaby Street fashion, groundbreaking cinema, and of course, music. Bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones weren't just British bands. They were a global phenomenon. It was this explosion of creativity that basically defined the entire decade for the world.
But it wasn't just about music and fashion. This cultural revolution went hand in hand with some really deep social changes. The laws on things like divorce and abortion were liberalized. There were new laws pushing for equal pay for women. And, people just had more money. Consumerism was on the rise. More cars, more stuff. At the very same time, new waves of immigration from the West Indies, India, and Pakistan, people who were actually encouraged to come and help rebuild, were shaping the diverse, multicultural Britain that we see today.
Now, what's really fascinating is that all this cultural stuff was happening at the same time as this incredible wave of British scientific and tech genius that literally changed the world. Take Sir Frank Whittle's jet engine. Okay, so it was first developed back in the 30s, but now, in the post-war era, it was completely revolutionizing how we traveled the globe.
And then there's this. In 1953, a team in Cambridge, including Francis Crick, makes a discovery that unlocks the very secret of life itself, the double helix structure of DNA. I mean, think about that. This one single breakthrough laid the foundation for everything, from modern medicine to solving crimes with forensics.
It wasn't just high-level science either. British invention was changing our day-to-day lives. You know the ATM, the cash machine? Well, in 1967, a guy named James Goodfellow invented the first one. A simple idea that completely changed how every single one of us interacts with our own money, all over the planet. And this incredible run of innovation didn't stop. It carried on for decades, leading to what is arguably the most impactful invention of them all. In 1990, a British computer scientist Sir Tim Berners-Lee, invented the World Wide Web. Yeah, the actual system that you and I are probably using right now. He built the very architecture of our modern, connected world.
But all that optimism of the 60s, it didn't last forever. It eventually gave way to the really harsh realities of the 70s and 80s. This was a time of deep, painful division, socially and economically, that would, you guessed it, remake the nation all over again.
So, that common ground, that consensus that built the welfare state, it just started to crumble under massive economic pressure. We're talking about skyrocketing prices, but also huge industrial strikes that brought the country to a standstill. It created this feeling of national crisis and a really bitter divide between the powerful trade unions and the government.
And as if all that economic chaos wasn't enough, it was happening alongside a brutal and violent political conflict. In Northern Ireland, the sectarian struggle they call the Troubles was escalating dramatically. It would go on for decades, and as you can see, it ultimately cost around 3,000 lives. It got so bad that in 1972, the government had to impose direct rule from London.
It was out of all this chaos and division that Margaret Thatcher rose to power in 1979. And her government wasn't just a change, it was a revolution, a complete and total break from that post-war model. As this table shows really clearly, the nationalized industries like coal and railways sold off, privatized, the power of the unions crushed, and the financial markets deregulated. This wasn't just a policy shift, it fundamentally changed Britain's entire economic DNA.
All right, so as we get towards the end of the 20th century, the big question becomes, how do we heal these deep divisions? The answer led to another fundamental rewrite, this time of the UK's own internal political map.
This timeline really lays out the long, incredibly difficult road to peace in Northern Ireland. I mean, we're talking about decades of conflict. But slowly, a determined peace process, pushed forward by Prime Minister John Major, started to gain ground. And it all culminated in 1998 with the landmark Good Friday Agreement, which set up a whole new way for the different sides to share power.
And at the very same time, the power structure of Great Britain itself was getting a major shakeup. Tony Blair's government brought in this process called devolution. And what that really means is they started shifting significant decision-making power away from London and handing it over to Scotland and Wales.
And what this did effectively was create a brand new political map for the United Kingdom. Scotland got its own powerful parliament, able to make its own laws on some really key issues, and Wales got its own assembly with control over major policy areas. All of this built a much more complex, much more decentralized UK.
Okay, and that brings us right up to the 21st century, the modern era. And this period has been defined by one seismic event after another, events that have, once again, put the nation at a crossroads, forcing it to ask some really tough questions about its identity and its place in the world.
And let me tell you, the pace of change has not slowed down one bit. You have the 2016 Brexit referendum, a decision to leave the European Union that split the country right down the middle. Then the unimaginable shock of the global COVID-19 pandemic. And all of that has been followed by a period of pretty intense political instability. Each one of these events has thrown up fundamental questions about where the nation is heading next.
So here we are. We've seen Britain remake itself, over and over and over again. From a global empire to the creator of the welfare state. Through a cultural revolution and painful industrial decline, becoming a devolved union, and then deciding to leave the EU. It's been this long, turbulent, fascinating history of constant reinvention. And that leaves us with one final massive question.